Ladies and gentlemen, this is David Mirikitani with another episode of Matt Chat. We are brought to you by USA Wrestling, the national governing body for wrestling in the United States, and by Nike Wrestling. Go to athleteps.com for all of your Nike and USA Wrestling branded gear. My good friend Nick Mitchell is nodding because I read that without even reading it. I got it memorized. So on to Nick. Nick Mitchell, the head coach of Grandview University. They've won 10 out of the last 11 NAIA national titles. Had you on a couple years ago when you tripled the field up. Welcome back, man.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
So we talked off air. We should probably go full disclosure here. Grant Turner is our host, one of our hosts on Weighing In. He also helps with Border Brawl as a part of Athlete PS and Nike, and he's on your coaching staff. So I probably talked to you directly or indirectly a little more than most coaches. Right. So I'm just going to start with, how do you feel? Because I know anytime at the end of the season, in your case, you want 12 guys win. I guess 12 guys to make the finals and 10 guys win it. So there's always some disappointment in that some individual, didn't, you got real love for these kids. But overall, how do you and your staff feel about the season and the tournament?
Yeah, really. Overall, we feel good about it. I mean, like you said, there's always matches that stick with you. We had 6 guys in the finals, which was great. 3 of them won, and you know how it is. You go into the finals and it's going to be tough, and they're all going to be tough, and there's a chance you can win them all, but there's a chance it could go the other way too. And so you feel great about the 3 guys that won, and you hurt for the 3 guys that came up short of what they wanted. But really overall, the tournament for us, I mean, putting 6 we had 11 guys in the semis. We had 6 in the finals. And then the 5 guys that were on the backside, we had 3 thirds and 2 fifths. And that's a great feeling, because you talk so much about going into the tournament. You talk to your team, or at least we talk to our team a lot about, hey, the plan is never to be on the backside, but sometimes you're going to end up there. And how you compete on that side of the bracket says a lot about you and your toughness. And to have those guys all finish odd and 3 of them get third, 2 fifths, man, that's huge.
It's funny you say that, because I use you got to finish on an odd number, and I think that some people don't necessarily understand that. It's like you got to win your last match. Obviously, is the short way of saying it. We saw it. I was at the Big 12s. Missouri did that. All their kids in the finals finished third, or non-finals finished 3rd, 5th, 7th. And I think it had a lot to do with them winning the team race. I mean, obviously you guys won it by enough that not 1 or 2 specific matches made the difference, and not to bring up anything sour, but a year ago you lost it by where 1 match could have made a big difference, when it's,
sure.
Anytime it's less than 10 points, and especially if it's a head-to-head 1-point matchup, it's 6 for me and -6 for you. And then there you go. That's the difference, Yeah. So, and I do want to point out, I talked to GT Sunday, called him and just congratulated him as my boy. And I was like, man, even the one kid that didn't medal for you made the quarters, lost in overtime, got in the blood round and lost in overtime. And so, I mean, I'm sure you guys' hearts bleed for that young man, but it's just, the kids, it felt like just talking to Grant. I talked to Grant the Monday a year ago. So we're talking on Tuesday, basically 52 weeks ago. And I will just say it was an emotional conversation. He's my friend, and we always talk about when you're with friends, things stay in the vault, but it was emotional. And it felt like, not that you guys weren't super committed to your process and winning, but that there was going to be a recommitment to that. Yeah. And these guys all talk to me about what a great leader you are. Like Reedy, Henderson, Clark, those guys all talk to me about you as a leader, because whenever something is going that right, you always want, if you're somebody like me and you're curious, what are you guys, what is different, right? Because you're doing what basically everybody wants to do, which is win a hell of a lot of wrestling matches. Right. Dual meet streak is at 100 or something crazy like that. I'm not going to ask you to tell me why you're a great leader. I mean, I think that's an awkward question. What I would ask you is, what do you think makes a great leader? Like if you're watching a Nick Saban or a Bill Belichick or a Phil Jackson or anybody, whoever you look up to in wrestling. I don't want to put anybody's names, in your mouth, but what do you think makes great leadership?
Yeah. So, I mean, really it's cliche, but you always hear the best leaders talk about creating a culture. And that's really what we've worked the hardest at in this program. And, I was fortunate enough to be the guy who got to start the program here. I was the first coach. 2008, 2009 was the first season of wrestling at Grandview. And, maybe I kind of got lucky. I fell into it. And I started like talking about this championship lifestyle thing. And it's just been what we built our program around for the last, since really the second year of the program is when we started talking about it. And I think the key there is if guys like Reedy and Henderson and Turner are talking about me being a good leader, maybe there's part of the answer right there is that it's not me, it's those guys. They're bought into it. We've all seen programs where assistant coaches maybe they are not propping up their head coach. Maybe they're not saying, hey, wait, this guy's great.
There's one in your state.
Yeah, I'm sure there is. I'm sure there's more than one.
Yeah, but there's one that specifically does a lot of that behind the head coach's back. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a train wreck, and then vice versa. Sometimes you hear head coaches maybe talking about their assistants as, oh man, he's got a long ways to go and this and that. And I think there's got to be a real mutual relationship where we're all looking out for each other and trying to build each other up. And we set that example, hopefully, for our team. And then you want a team full of guys that do that too. And so it's just, you really have to be committed to that process of developing culture. And it has to be clear. I think people know this. It's not like a new idea. But if it's not clearly defined what your culture is and what success means for your program, then how can you talk about it all the time? How can you build around it? How can you make it a daily process if it's muddy, if you don't really know what you're after? And so I think that's been a big part of it with us is there's clarity around what we stand for, what this program is about, and what we're after every season. And because of that, it's really easy for the other coaches to get on board. It's really easy for new recruits to get on board. It's just you try to keep it as simple as possible.
Yeah. So I know you back from when I was coaching in the junior college days, and we had some teams at the end that were pretty dang good. And, but it's tough. Like, I feel like that it was, and I don't know if I've ever said this out loud, so this may get a little personal, but that when you get a bunch of good kids, especially like in junior college, I always say if the kid had a 35 on the ACT and a 4.0 and 4 state titles and won Fargo 8 times and had a perfect social record, that young man wouldn't be in junior college, so you're dealing with somebody that has areas of improvement somewhere. And if they're really good wrestlers, they're usually are in the other, usually it's academics or behavioral. And, you also know in general that in college, kids make bad decisions. Kids drink, kids fight, kids may use drugs. And when that's the prevalent culture at that age, and I'm not saying this about Grandview University versus St. Louis Community College of Merrimack versus Harvard or Princeton or any school in the world. It's just all of them. That's kids. I got away from mom and dad. I don't have a curfew. All these different. I'm gonna experience my freedom, and that's the prevalent culture. Even if you have 60 people on your team committed to a lifestyle, and you're going to a school with 6,000 people. There's 5,900 people saying don't do that. In some way, shape, or just a couple beers, bro. Those kind of things, right?
Yeah.
So I always thought the best way to beat that, besides leading by example and having as many positive influence, is just to try to have as many guys on the team. So like if I say, Nick, if you don't want to live this lifestyle, I'll go put Grant in the lineup. Maybe he's not quite as good as you, but we'd rather get a fifth from him living the right way than a first or second from you living the wrong way. Yeah. How do you approach this with all the outside factors that are coming in, and some of those outside factors are not ideal?
Yeah. Yeah, there's so much to that too. I mean, part of what you're saying too is the truth that in our division, sometimes you get lucky on a kid and he has it all together and he's a great wrestler and he's a great student and he never gets in trouble, but that's pretty rare, And, right. I mean, and realistically, I mean, if some of those kids, if that was the case, then if he was a superstar, then maybe he would have chosen to go Division I. And so I think some of it is you start with showing kids that maybe there's an option here that you can be that good and still choose to come to Grandview instead of go to a Division I school because you're still going to compete and train at a high level. The next part, I think, is we talk about it in the recruiting process. And so, again, if our culture is all built around championship lifestyle, then that's the main thing we're going to talk about in the recruiting process. And what happens is you start attracting the right type of kid immediately, because we tell them like, hey, there might be other schools. There's definitely going to be other schools that can offer you more money. But if this is what you want, then this is a better fit for you. This is what it's an investment. It's an investment like in the rest of your life, not just the next 4 or 5 years.
Right.
And the culture starts to develop itself before they even get on campus, because the right kids are attracted to that and they still want to win and they're still competitive, but they understand it's bigger than just money and it's bigger than just the next few years of their life. This is going to have an impact on their entire lives. And then, of course, there is going to be some kids that you decide to take a little bit of risk on because they have a past history. But to me, I try to talk to the coaches and the families that are involved with that kid. And I like to be direct with that kid also and ask them straight out about, okay, if I heard that in your last place you got in some trouble, tell me about it. And if I hear a bunch of excuses, he's not ready to move forward. But if a kid will say, man, coach, I messed up, I was an idiot, I want to be at a place where I've got better people around me and I'm going to work hard not to fall into that trap again, then that's step one and we can work with that. And then the other part is what you're saying is just helping these guys understand when they're in college. College is weird. College is not real life. Like you said, like
it's fantasy. It's Candyland.
It is. You go to school for 2 or 3 hours a day. And here's an easy example. We talk to our guys about like taking naps during the day. Okay. Well, grown men don't take naps during the day. I've got a job. I've got real stuff to do. So number one, if you're in college and you're going to take a nap, it's like 20 minutes. That's a nap. You don't go back to bed for 2 hours. That's, but so it's these weird things about college where you think you can get up, you can go take a nap for 2 hours, or you can, like you said, everybody there is, they're normalizing things that aren't normal. And so you have to be able to step back and look at that and understand that, drinking every night of the week is not a normal thing to do. These people that think that like, they're going to smoke weed every day, the rest of their life and be successful. That's not true. That's not real. You can't do that.
Right.
And then if somebody's going to point out the outlier that does it and
right,
like, well, that's not you, that's not, if that guy did it, that doesn't mean you can do it. So it's
the people that dropped out of high school and college and they're like, well, I look at Bill Gates. I'm like, you're not Bill Gates. And the reason why and Bill Gates is the cry of the underachiever because most people just don't want to go do the work to, like, I always thought college is just proof you can multitask. It's like you can do 4 or 5 things at a time. And that's why, like, if you add wrestling to your resume, if you add Spanish club to your resume, if you add whatever to your resume, when it comes to the time to get a job, like, well, Nick's good at 4 things and David's good at 1, his GPA is 0.2 higher, but Nick was juggling 3 other things. I'll take the job is going to require 4 things, no naps and not drinking 5 days a week.
Right. Exactly. For sure. Well, and that's part of it too, is that we just talk about like, that I think a lot of guys go to college, even, that want to wrestle and they try to play this game of like, well, I want to be good, but I want to have a good time too, and so they start like playing this like back and forth. Well, I want to go to this place because the weather's going to be nice there. And I want to go there because I know that, those guys have they party a lot in the off season. And so they're trying to play a balancing act that being great isn't balancing. It's you choose greatness, and so that that's, and not to say that guys, still don't want to have fun if they come to Grandview, but you kind of have to redefine what that means.
Yeah, I think it was you guys or somewhere like the hard path is the easy path, that doing it the right way. And I like that, like, because I like any sayings that you can summarize, like you can use in a lot of different walks of life. When you were talking about picking a school, I learned a sales analogy. This person said, everybody wants the same thing in the world, the best product, the best service, and the lowest price. Yeah. And then there's this pause. This guy says to me, and he's like 20 years older than me at the time. Like, he was a genius in my field, and I was shaving 2 days a week. And he goes, pick two. And I thought about that, like, he goes, if anybody had the best product, best service, lowest price, they would have a monopoly on their business. Like, he goes, he used McDonald's. He's like, McDonald's isn't the best product. Right. He goes, but it's going to taste same every time. He goes, the bathrooms are clean. Like, he went through all this. He goes, the soda's pretty good there. He went through all this stuff. He goes, and the prices are reasonable. He goes, but when you think about going to college, like you said, I can go to school X and it's going to cost me this amount, or I can go to Grandview and it's costing me this much more. School X has had one national champion in the last 10 years. Grandview's had, God only knows how many. I'm sure 20, 30, 40, somewhere in there. If you're averaging 3 a year, 30, give or take, but a lot more than one, just right. For the point of reference. So, that's interesting. Well, here's one of the things that I struggled with as a coach. Like, I sat in a lot of living rooms. I did most of the recruiting for our team. And when you sit with a person, I say, Mr. and Mrs. Mitchell, I'm going to treat Nick like my son. I mean, sometimes I'm going to discipline the hell out of him, but I'm also not going to let a mistake bury him for the rest of his life. And so I always felt like, okay, Nick does whatever. Nick gets caught smoking weed, right? And you can talk to the right people and he gets community service and a fine, or you literally just put him through the legal process. And Nick's parents are 5, 6, 10, 12 hours away. I've always struggled with, if you just let him go through the process, you broke your word to the family. And if you do what you keep your word to the family, is the young man really learning a lesson? And I don't know if you have that struggle or how you balance that, but I'm super curious with a guy that I'm sure has to deal with that at least once or twice a year.
Sure. Yeah. I think that's the thing to me. It's funny because, and I do things like the NWCA Leadership Academy, we talk about things like this, and there's a lot of coaches out there that they just set these hard and fast rules where if you get caught drinking, you're off the team, and I don't know, like you said, I've got daughters and right now they're only 10 and 7, but I'm assuming someday maybe one of them might decide they want to have a drink. And if if they're in high school and that happens, I'm not going to be happy about it, but I'm not going to kick them off the team. I'm not going to kick them out of the house. And so it's how, like you said, how do you deal with that? And I think part of it is you just deal with it on an individual basis with the kid and you decide what's the right approach, just like anything else. I mean, no two people handle are going to respond to a situation the same way. And so there might be some kid that, yeah, man, I'm going to yell at him. I'm going to sit him for, suspend him, whatever. And there's some guys that approach might not even help the situation, and so it's more about learning who these kids are, what makes them tick, and then how do you help them so that they don't fall into this trap again. And then, yeah, there's a point where, okay, if this becomes a commonality or, with that kid or something that he continues to do, then, okay, you're affecting the culture now, now you have to go. But I'm not a one and done type of guy at all. I mean, I think it's real important to deal with each situation individually.
Yeah, it's tough though. It is, like, to me, it felt like it was a fine line, right? Like, and I think affecting the culture is the thing, right? And culture change is really subtle, like from bad to good or good to bad. Like they always say, like, you don't drop a frog in a pot of boiling water. You drop them in lukewarm water and just turn the heat up real slow. And the next thing you know, it's cooking, and it can go from bad to good. It's almost like you see a kid 2 years later, he's 5 inches taller. Like if you're around him every day,
right,
he never actually looked taller. And then you go back, you're like, man, this dude's tall. Like most of the public, he's taller than me now. So at least in my case. So like, your program seems somewhat similar to me, like University of Missouri, where like when Smith took over, they were the doormats of the Big 12, and they talk about Tiger style, and they have these specific parts of their culture. And it's not just wrestling, like score first, score last, wrestle hard on the edge. I mean, I think pretty much if you know how to coach, like those are I'm announcing and I know that's important.
Yeah.
So,
right.
But in your culture, in terms of character, how we're going to conduct ourselves, what we're going to do, just importantly, what we're not going to do. Do you have written things out for that? Like, is that something that's in a handbook or a set of rules or on a whiteboard, or how do you communicate those messages?
Yeah. And it's funny you say that too about Missouri with Brian Smith, because I've been in some different coaching academies with him, and Tiger style is really similar to championship lifestyle, but they give it a name. And again, it's their culture, and it's something that, again, it's clear they can build around it, and so, with what you're talking about, there's not, that, you might see it, you might hear it, but there are, I would just say, common phrases that our guys know, like you said earlier, like the hard way is the easy way. Okay. Well, that started in practice one day. I was just mad about how guys were trying to return people in rear standing. You know what I mean? It's like, they're trying to pull them down. They're trying to do it the easy way. And it becomes harder because then you create scramble, where if you freaking pop your hips and pick a guy up and put him down hard, that's a little bit harder, but it becomes a lot easier. And
yeah.
And then all of a sudden that's a life rule right there. Just like anything else, you try to skate by the easy way. And in the long run, it makes things tougher, where if you're disciplined and you do it the hard way, then it becomes easier. So there's that. I mean, my coach, my coach Miller, who was the head coach at Wartburg, he always said, do it anyway. And that changed my life. It definitely, like, it was something I finally heard my sophomore year at college. And it was just about the idea of how you feel is pretty much irrelevant. You
got a job to do today. Go do it.
Yeah. You got things to do. You don't feel, how often do you feel like going to class? No one ever really feels like doing homework, but you do it anyway, because that's what it's about. You get your extra workout in because we're going to do it, and so we talk about do more, the best people, they put more work in than everybody else. It's a simple concept. You do more than everyone else, and then you do more, and then you do more, and then pretty soon you become more, and then you get more. And everybody wants to jump to that get more part, but you got to do first, and then you become more. And so, yeah, man, there's all sorts of things like that in our program that we talk about a lot, that we try to drill into these guys, so that hopefully when they're doing interviews, they're talking about the same things.
Yeah, like there's this phrase that, hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard, which obviously is true. But when you get to college, like, you're obviously good at coaching, and part of being good at coaching is good at recruiting. Nobody bats 100% on their recruits. Like, I'm sure you have, I looked at your roster and it's super deep. I'm sure you have a couple kids on that roster that are not nearly as good as you thought they would be when you signed them. And there's a couple kids on that roster that are frankly probably better than you thought. Their ceiling, they've outkicked your expected coverage, so to speak.
For sure.
But that, I don't like that phrase, the hard work, because when you get to college, pretty much everybody's got some talent. Some people can jump higher and run faster than others, but you have to work. Like you said, there's no cutting corners. And I think that's the culture that, I think that's what makes relationships successful, whether it's a husband and a wife, or a father and a child, or two best friends, or a coach and an athlete, or assistant coaches. I'm around your guys a lot in the summertime. On the weekends, I might be with Grant more than you are. And
for sure.
But they all like each other. Like they have to sit at a booth for 4 or 6 hours together, but then they go out together, and nobody's criticizing anybody. Like, I heard somebody told me yesterday that in a Division I room a couple of years ago, one coach said about the other coach, "Why would you listen to him? I won X and he only won Y." And I was like, that's like 9 ways of wrong. I don't even know where to start.
Right.
So how do you, we have a lot of coaches that watch this program, a lot of athletes that watch this program. The coaches especially, they're trying to build cultures like you were. And I'm sure there were some dark days in the beginning where you're like, man, this does not feel like today went, like, it does not feel like we're one day closer to the goals. It feels like we went backwards and not forward. So maybe what advice do you have for people that are building it, that are starting a program, or they took over a program that stunk and like we're trying not to stink anymore? Like, it's not just these pillars, but like the perseverance, like what sort of mental games or things did you do for yourself to keep you going?
Yeah. Well, I think, part of what you're talking about there with coaching, and maybe wrestling falls into this issue more than other sports, because wrestling, people look at it a little bit as a selfish sport because you have to take care of yourself. And selfish is really the right way to approach that, because it really shouldn't be a selfish sport. But because it is so individual, I think that then you see coaches that, especially sometimes young coaches, that get done and they still want it to be about them, and so they still, there's some coaches just live for the corner, they want to, they're extreme corner, not because that's how they really are, but because they want to make sure people notice that they're in the corner. It's the guys that I don't, if I'm a parent and I'm looking at, where I'm going to send my kid, if I see a coach and I follow him on social media and he posts a ton of pictures of himself in the corner, he loves to share his accolades. He wants to name things after himself. He's on the front of the poster. There's an issue right there, and that's not, sometimes people hear that and they're like, oh, he's talking about, I'm not talking about anybody. You just see it a lot. And I think, it's about the kids. It's about the athletes. Why do I need to be on the poster if it's about the athletes? I think that's what the college experience is supposed to be about. So I would start with that, as a coach, is your number one best reminder is it's not about you. It's about the athletes, and then the next part to me is, if you're starting a new program or taking over a new program, you hear a lot about expectation. But people's expectation gets beat down a little bit. My expectation when I decided that I was going to take the job at Grandview, or when they decided that they were going to let me take the job, it was that, I was never going to be okay with anything other than winning a championship. It's just that we were always that was the bar right away. And I knew it wasn't going to happen right away. I wasn't unrealistic about it. But I also, I just wasn't going to be satisfied until that time. And, maybe people can probably argue with that maybe that's delusional or whatever, but I think that's why we are in the situation that we're in, is because when you create expectation, then here's what happens. The first year of the program, we have a national champion. The second year we have a national champion. The third year we have a national champion. And each year it gets better. And then the guys on the team start expecting good things. They when expectation is not just outside pressure, but it's, you expect to win. You want your athletes to expect to win. You want them to expect to have success. And that helps them raise their level. And so if I expect that and I have that expectation, of course, then the coaches and the athletes are going to feed off that. And that's a big part of it. So, but when I say some people get beat down, is I see this, when I was coaching at Wartburg, I saw this. We would have other teams in the conference that would come in, and this was their year, and they'd be good. They thought they were going to be the team that year, and they'd get knocked down and they'd be good for a couple of years. And then all of a sudden you'd see them go from like second in the conference to seventh in the conference for the next. It's like it beat them down. It drained their energy. It kind of crushed their hope. And you can't let that happen. If you're the team that's chasing, or starting something new, you can't let these things crush your hope.
They might have cut some corners too to get there, right? Like took some chances on some kids and let some things happen, and maybe the culture slowed down.
Sure.
I think you and my dad are obviously friends, and he coached for a long time, and he's obviously, I'm hugely biased. I don't know that he's like the best coach ever, but I think he's one of the best people that has ever coached. And he talked a lot about, he never actually My dad's not one of those guys that ever said, do this, don't do that. He just did it. And I think, part of it's just his culture. They're not the best communicators, but he would say, like, when a kid lost, he would say, like, hey, we have to do a better job getting Nick ready. Like, Nick did a good job. We didn't give him enough tools. We didn't give him a good game plan. We didn't train him right. Nick will be right there with that guy in the next one. When Nick won, he was like, Nick did a great job. When it was wrong, it was we, and when it was right, it was he. And that's always a red flag to me. Like, you said about the people posting pictures of themselves. To me, one of the crazy clues is like when you talk to a mom or a dad and they talk about their son or daughter, like, well, we
won this match.
Yeah. And I'm like, are we speaking French? Are you out there wrestling? Like, what's like, when did you weigh in, man? Like, you're done, bro. Like, you're done, bro. Like, stop doing that to your kid. Stop posting every single one of their accomplishments on social. Like, that kid and his friends are just rolling their eyes. Like, why is your dad doing this to you or your mom or whatever,
Yeah.
So one of the things I noticed, I was at the Life Open this year. And I know, like, you and Omi are obviously huge competitors, but you were his coach. I know he has a ton of respect for you. I know you have a ton of respect for him. I know people have interviewed you guys and talked, so I'm not going to, there's no need to rehash that. There's a lot of love there. We try to do stuff a little different here. But one of the things I noticed being at the tournament was that you guys all the coaches had notebooks. Okay. My dad used to have us do that. Can you walk me through what the purpose is, what that's doing, and how you feel like, obviously you feel like it's a help?
Yeah. So, I mean, for us, our when we're at a tournament, the notes I'm taking are two things. Usually it's, notes on our guys where they need to get better. Some people are really good at just remembering that stuff. I'm not. If I don't write it down, maybe it's because I'm getting older. I don't know. I can't remember anything ever anymore.
Yeah.
And I think I've kind of always been like that, because in the heat of a match, you're so like into the match and you're so focused that afterwards, if I don't write things down, I can be like, well, I don't remember what happened in that match.
Right.
Are different, they have they're like, remember these small details where I have to write them down. So most of it is me writing down notes on on our guys, and it drives what our practices are. It drives our technique. It drives what where we need to get better. The other part is it'd be me taking notes on guys that we're competing against too. Things that I know that we're going to see, tendencies, just things to be aware of that we know we need to watch out for if we wrestle them in the future or if we wrestle them again. So that's a big part of it. And yeah, it's funny because when I first started the program, not all the assistant coaches I had, Grant was one of them. He wrestled at Iowa State, and apparently that's not how they did it. And so at our tournaments, I'd have to remind these guys like, hey, you got to have a pen, write something down, and early on, they were young and I was younger too, but I'd get all heated. I'd be like, where's your freaking pen? I told you guys, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah. It's part of what you're asking of these guys.
Yeah. Right.
And it's a form of something that it's not angry, but it's a form of disobedience. You're like, hey, this is part of your job today. Right.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
So now it's just something that our program has always done it. And then, you see, Cole Mannion and Q and those guys that are coaching for Omi, then they're doing the same thing. And that's what good coaches should do.
Yeah. Like my dad used to always, and this is old school, like I'd have to teach him how to use it now on his phone, but he used to voice record.
Oh yeah.
Instead of writing it down.
Right.
And then he would just go home at night and, and just literally then put it all down on writing. And, so it's interesting, like how those things happen. And a lot of it is like, hey, that Nick Mitchell guy's good. We're probably going to see him in the finals of something important. And,
right.
His swing single's better than his high crotch, or he's real good with a left side shrug, or, he likes to put you in that broomstick cradle, like a couple, like if you get the leg, you got to shelf that thing right away.
Yeah.
And get your head to the outside or something different. Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny too, because the other part is when I first started when I was at Wartburg, we did a really good job of having film on people we were going to compete against. And so it was something that we started doing right away at Grandview. And coaches did not like it, people, and they still don't. I still have coaches that get upset because we'll record matches from other teams. Well, 90% of it now, if you're at a
it's online,
track or flow, so you don't always have to anymore. But it's funny to me, like, why would you get upset that we're recording your guys? Well, if it's a tournament that's already doing it, we're going to go back and watch it anyway, but it's not illegal. So, we're trying to prepare our guys to be the best they can be. And so, if you don't like it, that's your fault, not mine. But
you also do the same thing, right? Record us.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I would expect it. I would never, literally we have coaches and, from other teams that like try to stand in front of our girls when they're recording a match, or they'll, they get hostile about it, and I'm just like, man, like this should be, you can do it too. Go ahead. We're not going to get in your way.
Yeah. And I think, part of that too, as an athlete, I think is when your coach is doing a little bit extra, like, hey, like I lost, but coach wrote down 2 things he thinks I can get better at. Right. I mean, because like you said, you've created an expectation of winning. So I would think if you're not winning at Grandview, it could feel a little lonely at times. Cause like, well,
yeah,
like I joked with GT this year. I'm like, I want Ben Lee to be my bodyguard. Like I want to walk into the VIP one time with Ben Lee acting like my bodyguard. Right. Just like, I just think I would look cooler. Like I would just look cooler than
right.
which is not hard to do for me to try to look cooler. So you guys are part of this, I think we all agree, like, hey, you like women's wrestling. Of course we like women's wrestling. The mindset, the skills, the character building should not be gender specific. I don't think, I'm not going to ask you that. It's a weird softball question. Everybody likes women's wrestling, but Iowa, University of Iowa, the first Power 5 school to have it. You guys have people on staff like Allie Reagan, which is, a different deal. I think the nationals they're either like right away or coming up. Yeah. Yep. So I guess my question to you would be, as somebody that now has men and women in the room, right? How has that changed the culture? And I don't mean like change the culture, like now they don't want to do championship lifestyle, or now it's even more of a championship lifestyle, but personalities are different. Tendencies are different. Like, I'll just say this and I'll get out of the way. Like the coach at North Carolina soccer that had all those national championship teams said that he used to yell at the girls, or I guess the ladies in college, because they would talk while they were warming up. And he said what he found was when he did that, they just shut down mentally. That 10 or 15 minutes to socialize was really important to them.
Yeah.
And like my dad's character, he ain't got much to say anyway. So like, he'd be like, why are we talking? Why are we not stretching? And so what differences have you seen? How has it made you a better coach? Obviously they're focused on freestyle and things like that more. Just walk me through that a little bit.
Yeah. So first of all, I mean, we're really fortunate that when they decided to start women's wrestling here, we hired another full-time coach. So Coach Crinzy is the coach of the women's program. And I say that because there's a lot of programs right now that are trying to start men's and women's wrestling, or they have men's and they're adding women's, and they expect one coach to coach both of them. And I just don't think it's fair. It's
too
not
much, yeah,
to either side. And to me, it's really similar to having one coach baseball and softball. They're real similar, but they're not the same. Women are wrestling freestyle, the men are wrestling folk style. Same with baseball and softball. There's some similarities, but they're not the same sport. And so you would never ask, one coach to do both of those things. And so that part of it has been, I love the growth of women's wrestling, but sometimes I feel like these schools are not doing it for the right reasons. Of course they all want to make some money, but it can't be just because they're trying to make money only. You got to do it for the kids. So that's part of it. So, but with that said, we're also fortunate that our women's team, they use our original wrestling room. And so they have their own facility. Also, we have our facility, but then in the spring, when we start our freestyle stuff, they will train with us most of the time, just because they're still, that might change in another year or so because their roster really is growing. So they, it might end up getting crowded with both of us in there. But I really enjoy it because Coach Crinzy brings his girls in and we coach together, and we try to work together as well as possible. But I think a lot of what you're saying is interesting, because one thing I've noticed is I think they're more coachable. I think that they listen better. They ask questions a lot more. It's funny, man. They just like they'll come in our room and I don't know, maybe some guys are good at this, but the girls, even some of them who don't know me, will, hey, coach, I got a question for you, and I'm like, I'd love to coach, obviously. So I like to help.
Yeah.
But I feel like sometimes guys wouldn't do that unless they already knew that coach or they already had a relationship. They seems like they're really curious on just, they want to get better. So that part's been interesting to me for sure.
Well, I mean, it probably goes back to like men will never ask for directions, we don't want to look like we don't know everything. And if that's sort of built into your culture as a boy or a girl growing up, and, obviously everybody should feel comfortable asking questions, and the culture should be like, I know whenever I do a clinic, I'm like, hey, if somebody asks a question, even if you think it's dumb, even if it is a dumb question, if somebody makes fun of that person, I'm sending you home, and I don't care if I got to give you your money, your mom did your money back, but
right.
And hopefully that opens up the communication lines a little better for that, because I think that's a thing where you only really learn through through struggle. And when you struggle, you should have questions on how do I stop struggling, right?
Yeah. When I think you want your athletes to be like active learners, and it's funny, even in our practice, sometimes I've noticed where sometimes if I show something, I'll be like, who's got questions? And it'll be nothing. But if our assistant coaches, sometimes when they show stuff, they'll get more questions. So I'm like, okay, well, either the guys don't want to ask me or, or they think that because it's Coach Mitchell, like I just need to shut my mouth and get to work. And so I'm like, man, we got to make sure that we're having the assistant show more often, because I'd rather there be questions. I like
you're getting better feedback with that methodology than the other one.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, that part's important, man. And like, as everybody learns a little bit different. And if you need to see something 2 or 3 times, then ask the question. And so I appreciate that about the women's program for sure.
Yeah. And then there's also the thing, like sometimes people just need to feel it, right? Like, some people are not visual learners or audio learners or tactile learners and all those different things. Like I coach some guys in jiu-jitsu, and they're actually better than me at jiu-jitsu, but I just show them like, wrestling situations for jiu-jitsu, but they're grown, like they're paying taxes and they got jobs. And I'm like,
right,
your job is to come to me with the problem every week.
Yeah.
Like, hey, I got stuck here. I couldn't finish a single leg, or when I shot my head out here and got choked out in 3 seconds. Your job isn't to tell me the solution, but your job is to tell me the problem. If you don't know where you need to improve, you're not going to improve as fast as you can. And
right.
I think that's even more so when you're coaching a big group of people like you are. Like you might, okay, I'll just use the Life Open because I was there. Maybe you had 5 or 6 guys struggle at getting out of legs.
Mm-hmm.
But there's probably 40 guys that are, like they're better at it, or, so then you take your whole team and y'all work on getting out of legs, or is it, we're going to do some one-on-ones, or when we do bottom work, we're going to break people out. These guys are going to work on sit out, Granby hip high series. These other guys are going to work on hip smash, toe out, change the crab, or what, pull the leg across, whatever you guys do.
Uh-huh.
And your guys' communication, I feel like, has to be really good when these guys are making these adjustments throughout the season.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And that's always an interesting thing, because usually if we have, common notes among the coaches, then we know, all right, this is something we got to go over as a team, because when we have our notes, then usually on Monday we'll go around and we'll hit guys up individually. Here's what I had for you. Here's what I had for you. And then we'll have 6 or 7 things that was like, okay, we got to hit this as a team.
Yeah.
And it's only been 8 guys, but 8's too many. So then the whole team is going to review it, and to get back to it. And it's funny too, when you're saying that, like, even from the opposite side, like you show guys, they have to feel it, or they have to see it, or, whatever. Sometimes I feel like as the coach, it's the same thing. Like some things guys can ask me and I can be like, yeah, you need to put your head right here, and then you'll be able to finish that shot. But sometimes they're like, what do you do in this situation? And I'm like, I don't know. Let me feel it. I'm like, okay, here's what I would do. And then you get in there. So it's vice versa too. It's sometimes I need to get in there and feel that situation too. Cause you know how that is. You can tell a guy, well, just do this. And they're like, he's not letting me. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, let me gotcha.
Yeah, that's right. Like, coach, I'm trying. I remember the advice yesterday.
Right.
I'm not doing
for sure.
that.
Yeah. I crack it. I mean, we, as coaches, we say some of the dumbest stuff sometimes because we're just like, we want to be involved, when it's like that. It's like, go get one. Oh, well, I'm trying. I'm trying.
Right.
Just pick your head up. And he's like, on my head. Like, I can't pick my head
400 pounds in my head. I know I'm not supposed to wrestle with my face on the mat. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that's funny. Like, my dad will be the kind of guy, like, he'll look across the mat and go, Nick, if you move your head 2 inches to the right and lean, the guy will fall over.
Right.
I will fall over. And then me, I'm like, all right, man, just put me in then I feel, I'm like, hey, your head's got to lean this direction, like,
yeah.
So you're right. Like, the guy's like, I'm doing this front headlock, coach, but doesn't feel, the bottom guy's like, coach, it's not tight. Like,
yeah.
All right, do it to me. I'm like, oh, okay. Your hand's got to go here. You're on the tricep, not the elbow, or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So before we go, I have a request, but I'm going to wait. So is there anything else you want to say either about the program, or is there anybody you want to thank? Because it's a fairly big audience, like some specific people that maybe don't. I saw your Facebook post about the kids and your wife and family, but is there, we obviously have a different audience here. Is there anybody you want to thank?
No, I mean, I think overall, when you look at a program like ours and any program that's been successful, there's a ton of cogs in the machine, and it's one thing that my old coach and I have talked about a lot is that you just keep adding cogs, and every cog is important, and every cog, if you understand how cogs work, everyone makes the job easier for another one, and so it's not, early on it was adding guys like Grant Turner, and then we add Paul Reedy, and then you add Grant Henderson, and then we've got our boosters, and then our nutrition guy, Joey Boyens with Eakin, we added them a few years ago. And each thing it makes the machine run smoother. It makes it run easier, and it creates positive momentum that it's hard to stop, and eventually, hopefully it's a machine that gets built that when I decide that I don't want to do this anymore, then it just keeps running, and it's not just about me. It's about all these pieces that are running, and it can run on its own.
Yeah, well, you guys have built something there that's like, it's like, I texted Omi last night. I just said, hey, man, I'm sure you're disappointed, but you've built something there that's sustainable, and, when you're disappointed with second, you're doing something right with your life.
Yeah.
Because, basically every other team in the country except you would be happy where he was,
Right.
So, yeah. I mean, and that's part of, leveling up, all the different, slang or whatever. So I have 2 requests. I think they're both one's super reasonable.
Okay.
Ostrander, you got to get him a national championship shirt. Okay. The next time he comes in there, you put it Definitely. On my tab, whatever we got to do.
No,
okay?
We got it. He's the man. Yeah.
Okay. So, because he'll watch this and he'll smile at the end. And then, it's going on.
I'm writing it down right now.
Get him a medium.
Okay. Gotta give him a large.
Yeah, for sure. And then if you guys get any duels next year that are open, he and I would love to come up and call one.
All right, cool. Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Yeah.
For sure.
Be a good reason for us to sneak up there.
So, yeah, we'll plan on it, definitely.
All right. Well, this has been I always tell people my best podcast, so I just talk to guys that are really smart. We just turn the recorder on. So this has been a lot of fun. Needless to say, congratulations. Thanks for the time. Thanks for the intellectual generosity. I appreciate you not just giving sort of the canned answers, because I think that's how there's all these phrases for growing the sport, but talking to the people that are killing it and them actually telling you how they're killing it is how people grow. And I respect the fact that you're not afraid. Like, hey, this is what we do. You can come and get us anytime, any place. We're here for it. So congratulations for Nick Mitchell. I'm David Mirikitani. Thanks for watching and listening. We'll talk to y'all next week.
Appreciate it, man. Thanks.